Okay, good morning, everybody. So we're here this morning with Jeff Sears from Area 10 and Richard Loveys. And Richard is a model maker extraordinaire. I had no idea that he even did this, but he's going to be telling us all about the models that he's made and how he's done this, actually. For the time being, Richard's very happy for you all to come away from being mute and to interject with questions whenever you would like to. And the only thing I would ask is that if you would like to interject with a question, if you could go to the bottom of your screens and you'll see some icons at the bottom. You'll see one on the right-hand side that says reactions. So if you click on there, there's a little clap hand icon. So I've just put it on for me and you can see what happens. And that's basically like putting your hand up for the teacher. And so it's just to say, I'd like to speak, please. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jeff. And Jeff, you can take it away, please.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today and realising it's Saturday, not a Sunday. That's good. Well, I was thinking, I guess we all have built various models in our time. I certainly did when I was younger, building boats, cars and planes. But I must admit to the fact that I never quite got beyond the stage of just gluing them together. I never really sort of did a proper paint job, fixing decals and making it look like the manufacturers intended. So during lockdown, we realised Richard was a bit of an expert on this and he spoke to Area 10 about it. And so we thought it would be really nice if he could do it to a wider audience of the whole club. And so that's what it is today. So in case you don't know Richard, he's been a member of AMOC for over 50 years. 10 of those years he was the assistant rep for Area 10. He's also served on the publications committee and was a trustee of the Aston Martin Heritage Trust, so he's been pretty involved. And having owned several Astons, he's also written a book which you might be able to see here. It's on the subject of Aston Martins. And if you read AM Quarterly, you'll see regular articles by him reviewing models of Aston Martins. So he's certainly the go-to guy for this subject. So I'm delighted to say that Richard has agreed to speak to us all today. And you'll find that maybe unlike some of the Q&A sort of thing, this is heavily image-based, so there'll be quite a lot of pictures dominating rather than our faces sort of thing. If you do your view appropriately, you'll see the slides and the presenter. Okay, so I'd like to start by introducing Richard and asking him to tell us how you first got into making models, Richard.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, for your introduction. But before I answer your question, just a word of thanks to Christine and to the club, well, and to you for asking me to do this. And Jeff, also especially thank you to you for managing and organising all the images, because you put an awful lot of work into getting the pictures that we're all going to have a look at. And then finally, of course, thank you to those of you who are watching, wherever you happen to be. Most of you, I guess, will be in the UK, so it's good morning. But if you're somewhere else, it might be good afternoon or good evening, but whatever's appropriate, hello. Right. I ought to also say to Area 10 people who would have seen my presentation in February, you will have seen and heard quite a lot of this already. So if that's going to disappoint you, my apologies. There are a few new bits in here to update it. I aim to take something a bit less than an hour. And as Christine has said, if you want to lob in a question while I'm talking, or you want to put one on the screen, please feel free to do so. I'm quite happy for you to interrupt me. So how did I start getting into models? Well, I started rather like you did, Jeff. I think I started at school. Yeah, can you, yeah, that'd be lovely, thank you. I started off at school making wooden aeroplane models because that's all there was at that time. Some of them were what they called solids because they were made of solid wood, as you'd expect. Then you just put them on the shelf and looked at them. Others were made of tissue paper and wood and were supposed to fly. Some of them did, some of them didn't, most of them crashed. And then I started my working career. I worked for 2 car manufacturers, and so I rather left aeroplanes behind me and became interested in cars. In 1965, I bought a DB24. My wife and I ran that for 6 months. Delightful car. I found it was a little bit expensive to run on my fairly modest wages, but it got an interest for me in Aston Martin, and that's really where I started becoming interested in Astons. And a couple of years later, I made these 2 plastic models. LM7, you can see from the size of it, is well, you may not necessarily know, but it's to 1/32nd scale, which is about the scale that is used for slot cars. This is a plastic model. I built it pretty well as it was in the box. You know, you build it to the standard specification. The one at the bottom, the DB5, that was quite an interesting one because the body was for a Revell slot car, because the body was quite nicely made. And because it's for a slot car, it omits things like the windscreen wipers, but I suppose they fall off if you drive the car off the circuit, as I sometimes did. The wheels, I think, were the slot car wheels because they were rather better than the other ones I had. But the interior and the chassis, which you can perhaps see some of the interior, that was from an Airfix model. So fairly early on, I established what was to become a pattern, make models of Aston Martins and be prepared to modify them and change them. The next thing I did, while I was the area rep, David Lewington was the representative and I was his assistant, as Jeff has mentioned. And David came up with the idea of, why don't we have a light-hearted and informal competition each year and award a prize. And so this, as you see, is what we call the 10 trophy. And those of you, many of you I'm sure will know, that's Project 215. As it raced at Le Mans in 1963. It was I built it from a kit. I can't remember whose kit it was now. I think it was a Provence Moulage, a French manufacturer. And there's a glass box which goes over the top of that. So that was one of not the earliest models I made of an Aston Martin, but I was well on the way then. So I think that probably answers the question, how did I first get into making models?
So can you tell us what sort of other types of models there are available?
Yes, there are quite a lot of different types of models. The first one and the most commonly available are what you see in this next picture, which is the DB5 built by, I think it was Dinky Toys. Yes, there it is. It says Dinky in big letters, doesn't it? That was one you could go into shops. I won't even say model shops. You'd go into toy shops and buy them. Not terribly expensive, very robust, and they were made of a very, very hard metal. They were die cast, so they could turn them out in thousands for not a huge amount of money. I just draw your attention to the wheels because I will be talking about wheels later on. These wheels, well, as you see, they're meant to be wire wheels, but they're made of a casting, which at the time we thought that was brilliant because it was rather better than the original wheels that Dinky Toy tended to use, which looked a bit like dinner plates. So this was a big advance, but in today's technology, they're really not very good. But at the time, an excellent model. And these days, we have companies like Mini Champs and IXO and Spark and so on, continuing in this vein of making ready-built models that are reasonably modestly priced, and these days are hugely detailed, absolutely amazing. Model making then moved on to what was called tin plate, and the name suggests how it works. Can we go back to thanks Jeff. Tin plate is made of flat sheets of tin with rectangular slots in them and little tongues that go through, and they press them into curved shapes, and they were not bad, but a bit different. And then plastic models, I've mentioned the slot cars, that sort of thing. And now resin is used. Resin is a chemical mixture, a bit like what you might think of as fiberglass, but without the glass fibers in it. It's very strong, absolutely rigid, so you can't bend it at all, but you get an enormous amount of detail. And a lot of today's ready-built models come from China. hugely detailed, not terribly expensive. And mainly what I'm going to be talking about this morning are 1/43rd scale models like this dinky toy, where the models are about 4 inches long. There are some that are a bigger scale, which I will mention, but the 43rd scale ones are the most common. Right, then we move on to kits. I'm sorry, Jeff, that I pushed the slide apart. Yes, here we've got 2 kits. The one on the left, made by some people called V2C Replicas, you can see is in contrast with one on the right, which is from SMTS, and the one on the right is a currently available kit. Just look at the difference in the numbers of parts, the standard of the drawing, and the fact that on the right hand side we've got a whole lot of components that are very detailed and made of what's called photo etched metal, which I'll come back to in a little while. The V2C one, the fixed head coupe, I still haven't made that one, and I probably never will now. I think I bought that for about £5 whenever it was in 1977 or sometime like that. The DB3S8, the one on the right, that's as the car DB3S as it raced at Dundrod, but you could make it, because there were alternative parts, you could make it as it was as at Le Mans. So you got differences in the air vents and that sort of thing. Beautifully detailed, which makes painting so much easier, and also you get the representation of detail is much better with that. The early kit, you can see perhaps the wheels are with cast spokes. The one on the right, I'm not sure how much detail you can see, but and I'll show you a bigger picture of a wheel. The wheels are now made with photo etched spokes, and they're absolutely brilliant because they look properly like spokes, which is great. So some of the technological developments, photo etching, which I've mentioned, if you look just above the wheels, you can see a little rectangular shape with a radiator grille and a few other parts in it. You start with a piece of metal, usually brass or steel, about as thick as a postcard or a business card. You print onto it a mask using photographic techniques, and computers these days are so brilliant. And you then dip the metal in acid, and the acid eats away anything that hasn't been covered with the mask. And you come up with very finely detailed parts. You see here a grille, you can see the spokes, the three-armed star. They're the spokes for the steering wheel. The X-shaped thing is a frame in front of the grille. It's very good for other small things like windscreen wipers and the wings badge. The wings badge on a 43rd car is only like 3 or 4 millimeters across, and they are beautifully detailed when you see them on the model, or you take them out of the box. One of the other advances, which we don't see in this one because it wasn't really necessary, is that you can now get chrome plating. So the chrome plating can be applied to plastic now as well as metal, which is great. Transfers or decals, this isn't a particularly good example because it's not a very detailed one, because it wasn't necessarily on the car. But if you think of some of the liveries you get on racing cars, hugely detailed, and the printing of those transfers is absolutely amazing. And I've mentioned resin molding, which is often used. This is a white metal kit. White metal is a lovely medium to work with. It's very flexible. You can work it easily. You can drill it. You can saw it. You can shape it. So it's a nice material to work with. Resin is very good for detail, but you can't bend it. If you try and bend it, it just breaks. So that's no good. And one of the other advances, which you perhaps can't see in the picture, is that the tires in the SMTS kit, they have a proper flat tread on them, whereas the V2C, they're rather like dinky toy tires. They're round in section. Most of the kit manufacturers are in Britain. There are a lot in France and in mainland Europe as well. Let's now think about the types of model we have. We've got at the top end of the market, we've got one-off and hand-built kit, one-off models rather. Yeah, this one is DBR2. You can't see the registration plate on it. It's, if you into your DBR 2s or 1s, you will know it as 7BXH. This model is nowhere near 43rd. It's I think it was about an 8th scale, so it was about 1.5 foot long. absolutely amazingly detailed. You can get some idea that, I mean, it really looks like the real car. It was made by a chap called Dick Buckley, who worked down in Gloucester and had a little workshop in his house. The models are hugely detailed. He was making DB3Ss when I visited him several years ago now, and he had, I think it was 2 chassis, but just bare chassis, which he'd made. And every nut, bolt, washer, screw, rod, cable was all there, beautifully made. And he either made it himself or he made the drawings and patterns for other people to make them. One of the few things he didn't do was chrome plating, because you need some really nasty chemicals for that, so he would put that out. But other things he made them himself, and he hand made the bodies using a buck or a former, rather like full-size people do, or people making full-size bodies do. He made them out of very thin sheet copper. What an amazing chap he was. Alas, he's died now, so he won't. So there are no more of his. But the models he made, you might see them in a museum, you might see them in a private collection, and they are quite startlingly realistic. Gosh, I take my hat off to people like that. So that's the range of models. You can get kits, you can get ready builts, and you can get these one-off, really high quality ones. Jeff?
Yeah. Sorry, Richard, I was going to say, I used to build mine on the kitchen table. I guess, so where and how do you build your models?
Right, well, let's look at the where one. I build them in my garage. That's my sort of workshop bit at the end of the garage, just an ordinary bench. If you look at the right-hand picture, you can see an array of hand tools on the right. There's a selection of files. They're not normally laid out carefully and neatly like that. They're usually in a bit of a jumble. A couple of paintbrushes with the red handles, and above them there are 3 tins of Humbrol paint, which I find very useful. In the middle are some bits for my 1.5 litre car, and I'll show you pictures of the completed model a bit later on. And to the left you can see a saw. It's called a razor saw because the blade is very thin, but very sharp and excellent. And then there's a modeling knife with the aluminium handle, and above that some drill bits. I use drills down to about 0.3 of a millimetre. They're terribly fragile, they don't last very long, so I have to keep buying them. And then you've got the 2 little pots there, one of super glue with the black top, and on the left of that is something called decal set, which you use when you put transfers or decals on, which come flat on paper. When you put them on a 3-dimensional item like a curvaceous racing car body, sometimes they don't sit very snugly. So you put this stuff called decal set. I think the trade name's probably changed now, and it softens the carrier film and makes the transfer sit nice and snugly down on the body. Just above the paints and to the right of the glue is part of what I call my parts box. Some of you may wonder what the parts box is when I write about it. It's really the collection of spare parts that I get and I have accumulated over 20 or 30 years of making models. I mentioned that the SMTS kit had alternative parts for 2 versions of the DB3S. Well, the unwanted or the unused ones go in there. Sometimes I buy things. I will buy, a packet of windscreen wipers or a set of wheels or something like that. And they come from various places. Some kits, they give you quite a lot of extra items, and it's a nice place to rummage through if I need spare headlamps or a different steering wheel or something like that. So I've got quite a lot. That's only one very small part of it. And then at the back are some of the paints, a red paint, and the darker red one is primer. Can't remember what the white one is. That's probably clear lacquer. I buy them off the shelf. Those 3 happen to come from Halfords. You can go to a motor factory and they will sometimes mix them up for you. So you go in and say you like Aston Martin colour number 123 or whatever it is, and they will mix it for you and put it in an aerosol. Halfords used to do that. I don't think it does anymore. My local Halfords doesn't anyway, but it used to be extremely helpful, and I found that really good. You could, of course, buy a proper spray gun and a compressor and a little spray booth and do it properly. I get acceptable results by what I use, and I don't have a spray booth. I just have lots of newspaper. On the left, you can see just another view, and the the cabinet with the multicolored drawers that contains screwdrivers and files and paints and sandpaper and all sorts of other odds and ends. And you can see the collection of paint behind. So I don't use anything special. I don't have lathes or presses or anything like that. It's all simple hand tools. And I suppose one of the last things that I've started using is a pair of glasses, because I've got to the age now where I can't see awfully well unless I use that. Okay, so that's where I build them. The other part of your question, Jeff, was how do I build them? First of all, I start off by doing some research. What does the car look like? It may sound a bit silly, but if you're going to make a model, you do need to know. And you can go on the internet, you can look in books, you can look in magazines, you can look at published photographs. I go to the Trust, the Aston Martin Heritage Trust photograph library, hugely helpful. There's a lot there. The best thing is if you can see the car itself, walk around the car, make some notes, take some pictures. Many years ago, when Nimrod was racing at Le Mans, the St. John Horsfall race meeting run by the Aston Club was the week after, and the Nimrod team would have their Le Mans cars just there for us to have a look at. And I thought, oh, I'm going to make a model of that one day. I had no idea how I was going to do it because nobody made a kit for it. So I sat down with my little notebook and pencil, because I'd forgotten my camera, I think. And I was busy making sketches and drawings of where the livery was and what it was and what color this was and that was. And Mike Salmon, who'd driven the car, came over and looked at me and thought, what's this chap doing? And so I said, oh, I'm going to make a model of it one day. Oh, he said, and walked away. I thought how nice it was that I could actually see the car complete with the dirt and the oil all over it as it was. And I did indeed make a model of it a bit later on. So you might say, well, what's all this research for? What are you looking for? It's particularly the case with racing cars. What color is the car? It's also important for the road car. I'd like to get the detail right and not just say, well, I'll paint it red because red's a nice color. No, if the car was black with a shiny bonnet, polished aluminium bonnet, then that's what I want to make it like. The race livery for racing cars, particularly these days, is important. Some of the pictures you see will be of the car as it was in practice, and that can be different. So you need to be a bit careful with that. And then things like the specification. What about the pedals? Well, yes, of course it's got pedals. All cars have pedals. Yes, but do they sprout up from the floor? Do they hang from the fascia? Or are they fitted on rods that go through the toe board? You might say, well, it doesn't actually matter. Well, to me it does, because I'd like to get it right. My wife said to me once or twice, well, you can't see the pedals on these model cars when you finish them. I said, no, but I know they're there, and the full-size car's got them, so I'm going to fit them. Where does the handbrake levers come from? Again, that can be in several places. Is it in a rubber gaiter? Has it got leather around it? Is the handle part chrome painted? What is it? And then the more obvious things like the dashboard, the instrument panel. What shape is it? What are the instruments? Where are they situated? Has it got big switches or knobs or that sort of thing on it? Let's get it right. Dick Buckney, the chap I mentioned who made that beautiful DBR2 model, I remember he said to me, it takes just as long to make it wrong as to get it right. And the implication is you might as well get it right. So I do try and make my models accurate. I'm sure I've made mistakes, but I do try and get them right. Okay, so that's the sort of research bit, if you like. The next thing is when I get a kit, because I build most of my models from kits, the first thing is as soon as I get a kit, I will open the box and check the pieces, because there's almost always there's a parts list or an illustration, so you can check that there should be 4 wheels or 5 wheels, there should be this, that, and the other. Excuse me. A lot of these model kits are only made in small quantities and for a short time. So if I haven't checked and I get the kit out 10 years after I bought it to make the model, and I find it's missing something, it's going to be very difficult to find it. So for me, it's absolutely essential to check the kit. Very rarely is anything missing, but if there is, the manufacturers have always been extremely good and supplied whatever it is that I've needed. So that's the first thing. And then when I'm going to build it, the first step is to clean up the moldings. They often need some of the mold lines cleaned off. The holes that are indicated sometimes need drilling out properly. And that takes a little while, and you need nice smooth surfaces for painting. And then I'll start checking that the pieces actually fit together properly. Sometimes the manufacturer will have put little dimples in the moldings, as I said, with the indication of this is where you drill a hole to fit the axle. Okay, you drill a hole, fit the axle, try the wheels on. Oh, and then you only get 3 wheels touching the ground at once, so you have to fiddle about and make one of the holes oval. That's all part of the process. Sometimes you don't get any indication at all where to put the axles, but that's just one of those things. So you check that the parts all fit, and then I'll start adding a few details. Some of you will know from the articles in the quarterly that whenever I build one recently anyway, I put tire inflators in the wheel rims. Very small detail, and they're very small. And actually, you probably can't see them very easily. But real full-size cars have a tire inflator, and you can see it. It's sometimes they're bright metal or chrome or steel. No, they wouldn't be chrome usually. They might be steel. Usually they're black, and so they say black tire inflator is very small. It's only about 1 millimeter long. But I will drill the rim, put the inflators in after I've painted the wheel rims. And I will fit the pedals, having found out where how they're attached to the car, and the handbrake lever and things like that, and seat belts. Very few kits and very few of the ready-built ones actually have seat belts fitted. But in an open car, you can see the seat belts, and you can see the seat belt buckles. And I will try and fit those with buckles that I've got from the parts box, particularly on open cars, because to me, they're an important part of the car. If the car had seat belts, then my models will. And then there might be other parts like interior mirrors. Quite often they're not included. I'll then do the painting, and the painting, as I've said, with an aerosol. And relatively, I suppose about 5 years ago, I realized that the models weren't looking shiny enough. No, because I'd forgotten to put a clear coat of lacquer on the top, which I now do. So it's a bit like proper people doing it with two-pack paint. And then you assemble the models. And one of the things I do is to keep a record of each of the models that I build. This is, oops, I don't really see it. This is one of my build sheets. So I put the instructions on, and then I write at the bottom that I filed this off and I sawed that, and I put a sample of the paint. Partly for my own interest, and partly because if I do a similar thing later, I might think, well, how did I do it last time? I can go and look at my build sheet. And I found that it's also very helpful when I'm writing the articles for the quarterly, because I can't remember some of the things I did 10 or 15 years ago. When I was talking to Area 10, somebody said, well, where did the models go? Well, most of them I keep. And I'll show you a bit of my collection in a moment or two. So I keep most of them. Some of them I've given to friends and family, because I've built models of particular cars they've had as gifts. A very few I've made on commission. People have paid me and I've made a model for them. I don't do that anymore, but I have done a few of those. And some of them have gone to the Heritage Trust collection up at the barn. So you'll find some of my models are up there, because I'd like to do that to help the collection there build up a bit. So that's really how and where I build my models.
Could you tell us, you could tell us which Aston Martin models you've built yourself?
Yes. Okay. Well, let's think about the collection of models that I've got. And there should be a picture of my model collection, or part of it anyway. Yes, there we are. That's 2/3 of my model cupboard at home. Mostly Aston Martin. These are mostly Aston Martins. I don't think there are any non-Astons in that picture. No, there are a few in the third bay on the right, because I started working with the Roots group, so I built a few models of Roots cars. Virtually all of them are 1/43, except the bottom left-hand side, where you can see the DB5, the green DB5 on the right at the bottom. To the left of that is a tin plate DB2, and then there's an Ulster. The blue one is an Ulster CMC 614, and then LM7, which I've shown you a picture of before, and then A3 on the left. So they're virtually all a 1/43 scale. I've got something like 90 road cars and 100 race cars. The racing cars are at the top and the road cars are at the bottom, starting on the left with the early ones and then just working across. I like them in date order. It's just how I choose to display them. I've built them, I suppose I've got models up to about 2013. More recent ones, it's difficult to get kits for because there are so many really good quality ready-built cars. And I think fewer people are building models from kits these days, so maybe it's not a commercial proposition. Although a gentleman called Michel Ligeret in France, who trades as AML models, he started making interesting kits in very, very small quantities of unusual Aston Martins, including some conversion kits. So you can get a conversion kit, you buy, I can't remember what make of DB11 it is, a coupe. He will sell you the parts to make an open version, the Volante. Oh, that's interesting. And he's also done one for the one-off V8 engine Signet, which some of you will have seen, or you will have probably read about in a magazine. So you buy the, I think it's a Spark version of that. I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You dismantle that with a bit of difficulty, and then you add his parts to it, and you then will have a V8 Signet. I haven't built mine yet. So yeah, this is the model collection as it is at the moment. I've got about 20 or 30 kits to build, so they'll keep me busy for a while. So that's the collection as a whole. And if you look very carefully, I can't even see them. There are some engines there, and I'll show you a picture of the engines in a second, because I like engines and I think they make terrific models. So if we could see that picture, Jeff, that would be great. Yeah, there we are. I've got 4 engines in my collection, and you can see from the ruler there how small they are. They really are tiny. Going from the left, that's, as I'm sure those of you who are interested in older cars, you'll recognize that as being the 2-litre engine. That particular model came as part of the model of Atom, the car that was built in the 40s and was a one-off, I suppose you call it a concept car today, which sold the factory, or sold the company, if you like, or to David Brown. Anyway, the engine should have been fitted to the model. And I thought, no, I'd like to see the engine standing on a bit of sand so I can look at it all on its own. And it's tiny, really very small. Next one on the right is the 6-cylinder Dbr One engine. There was a company called Paddock who made a very good model of Dbr Ones, and they made some with an opening, well, it was a lift-off, I think, rather than an opening bonnet and an engine. And then they sold the engine parts as a little kit just to make the engine. And so I bought one of those. And that, again, is beautifully detailed. And yes, I was rather pleased with that one. The V8 engine, the next one with the red fan on the front, that came as part of a kit for one of the Lagonda 1969 prototype. That's the car that was the William Townes DBS, slightly stretched with 4 doors, and the kit for that was amazingly detailed. Huge amount of chassis detail. You could turn the wheels so that they looked as if the car was about to turn around a corner. You had proper, well, not proper springs in the sense that they suspended the car, but they looked proper, and they did expand and contract a little bit. And this beautifully detailed engine. You probably can't see that, but on the cam boxes, on the top of the cam boxes, they even had a separate photo etched part with Aston Martin Lagonda etched into it. Oh, it was an absolute delight to make that. I made the engine long before I made the model, because the model itself was very detailed, and I kept thinking, well, I'll do that a bit later. And then the one on the right, you will recognize that perhaps as a V12 engine. That came from a DBR9 kit. Provence Moulage from France made a lovely kit with opening, well, it isn't open, they were removable doors, bonnet and boot lid, and an engine. So I bought a kit, took out all the engine parts and sold the rest of it on eBay because I didn't want it. I didn't need it because I'd already made one. And then I made the engine. Now, any of you who are familiar with the DBR9 engine will know that the exhaust system is like a, I don't know how do I describe it, a bundle of spaghetti. I mean, it's really, really tightly packed, beautifully made curved pipes inside the car. You have to be able to see the engine standing on its own to see it. And I've eventually found some photographs, and then I was up at ProDrive for I think it was an Area 10 visit, and I saw this incredibly complicated exhaust system, and I thought, no, I can't make that. So I've just fitted straight exhaust pipes, so you can see where the exhaust pipes, where the exhaust fits, but it's a bit of a cop out really. But on the other hand, there's no way I could have duplicated the the exhaust system. So those are the engines which I'm actually really rather pleased with. I like those. So let's now have a look at some of the cars I've built.
Okay.
Right, this one is the DB3S8 built from the SMTS kit that I showed you earlier, and this is what I suppose I would call a standard model. You open the kit, you look at the instructions, you do your research, and then you build the kit as the manufacturer of the kit intended it to be. You don't muck about and make things. This one, if you look in the left-hand picture, you can see the fascia with the steering wheel, beautifully detailed in 3 dimensions, and it's got pedals in, so I didn't have to make the pedals. That was rather nice. And you can see the photo etched pieces, nice bright shiny lamps, lovely kit, and it makes up to a beautiful model. What's the wheel doing down there on the right? Those of you who are interested in DB3Ss will know that in the 50s, Aston Martin had special wheels made with offset spokes in order to get the wheels to fit within the bodywork and yet maintain the maximum amount of track. Now, to do that, they had to have rims that protruded beyond the tyres with the outer set of spokes in them. Excuse me. And in the pictures of the cars, if you go and look at Dundrod or Le Mans pictures for 1955, you will see DB3Ss with these quite prominent wheel rims. SMTS, when they were making the kit, had the foresight, if you like, and the engineering ability to say, well, we'll do something about that and we'll make special wheels. So they made a separate ring which fitted on the outside of the rim with little dimples. You can, depends how big your picture on your screen is, but you can perhaps see the little dimples on the rim, which represent the outer ends of the spokes. When you assemble it all, it looks nice. I think it's absolutely fabulous. It's such a simple thing to do, and yet visually it makes the model look so much better. And again, looking at the picture of the wheel at the bottom, if you look at it at about 7 o'clock, you can see where the tyre inflator has been fitted. And you can also see how finely, yeah, that's it, thank you. Yes, you can see how finely made the spokes are. Absolutely amazingly good. You can see a slightly bigger image of the photo etch sheet in the left-hand picture, and you can see the amount of detail that SMTS have gone to in making this really, really lovely kit. Excuse me. So that's one of the models that you can make straight from the box. This is another one. It's DB37. DB37 was the only one that left the factory with a fixed head coupe body. It was built for a chap called Tom Mayer. Originally, it had a rectangular grille. Angela Brown had the car in about 1955, and she had the body modified with this oval grille, which to me is a lot more attractive. Anyway, this is how the kit was made by somebody called Tin Wizard in Germany. Good instruction sheet, lovely box. You can see the box on the right. I've got, I think, 3 of his boxes now, and they're great for putting components in when you're making other models. So thank you, Mr. Tin Wizard, for that. Lots of components you can see there. In the bottom on the left, you can see just above the tires, you can see the pieces you get, because you assemble the wheels yourself. You can see the circular frets for the spokes. So you've got 2 for each wheel, and then you've got a rim and a finisher which clips the whole thing together, and then you've got the hubs. And the wheel nuts on the left. I find it quite fun making the wheels, and they make up to be very realistic. look very realistic. And you've got the window frames, you can see the windscreen wipers. The oval thing just to the right of the wipers, you can see that on the rear screen at the back. It's the bit that surrounds the petrol filler. And a little bit above that, you can see just to the right of the lower part of the body, that rather odd looking thing with a piece sticking out to the left. There's the 2 inboard brake drums. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Nice bit of detail, which most of the time you won't see because the model will be sitting on its wheels. Straightforward kit to build, nicely detailed, parts fitted together well. Regrettably, Mr. Tinwizard doesn't make many Aston Martin models. I did email him and say, how about a few more, but he makes other things instead. But there we go. So those are 2 examples of building a model pretty well to standard as the manufacturer wanted or designed the kit to be built. The other way of doing it is where you modify them. And I wanted to make a model of A3. Nobody makes a kit of A3, but SMTS made a model of coal scuttle. And the coal scuttle model is on the left. And you can see lots of lovely components there, mostly made of white metal, a bit of photo etching. Lovely wheels, like those wheels, they're artillery wheels, as obviously as fitted to the car. On the right, I've modified the kit. You can see the most obvious thing is I've sawn off the pointy bit at the back of the body. Excuse me. I've also cut out the web on the front wings where the front, excuse me, where the front wings join the body, because they didn't have that valance. They just had a single strut. So that took a bit of doing with a saw and a file and all sorts of other things. The rest of it was pretty much the same. So because A3 and coal scuttle were very similar, some of the lamps and that sort of thing I didn't need, but the suspension, the steering wheel and so on, I used. And because it's made of white metal, it was quite straightforward to modify. You can drill it, you can cut it, and you can bend it. The rear of the rear wings is slightly, you can't really see them in the picture, but it's slightly modified. Now, if we go to the next picture, you'll see a couple of pictures of the, well, work in progress and then the finished model. I hadn't quite painted it, and I suddenly realized to my horror that what we would call the passenger seat, where the riding mechanic would go, was leaning back slightly more than the driver's seat. And there was a cutout in the body. You can see it in the top picture where the body is. I had to file the body, I had to cut the seat, I had to bend it and use filler to make good. Fortunately, I saw it before I painted it. Anyway, I was rather pleased with the way that the model turned out, because I bet there aren't many people who've got an A3 model in 43rd. The bonnet was aluminium, polished aluminium, as you will have seen if you've seen the car. I used self-adhesive aluminium foil that you can get for making models, polished it up a little bit and then lacquered over the top, and that gives it quite a nice finish. I was pleased about that. So that's one where you take a kit and you modify it to make a similar car. This is another one. I saw an article in a magazine, and I'll show you the completed model in a moment, of what the factory knew as DP2034, Design Project 2034. When they were engineering the Virage, the original Virage, they wanted to put the running gear into a road-going car so they could test it, but they didn't want it to look like a Virage. Well, we've got Lagondas. If we shorten a Lagonda, we could do that. And so that's what they did. They cut out, I can't remember how much it was. Anyway, on my model, it was about 4 millimeters. Couldn't find a kit, but I found someone who'd got this gold model. And the chap said, well, it wasn't made very well, so I'll sell it to you at a kit price. That was rather nice. So I took it all apart, cut it out, cut it in half, and you can see the saw cuts in the under tray and the underneath of the body, well, and the body itself. And I put strengthening plates in, and I put filler on the body, and I've cut the seating tray and shortened that, and I had to modify the seats. I had to buy new wheels because the factory didn't use Lagonda wheels. That might have been a bit of, no, I suppose they wanted to look different. I think those wheels were designed for Ferrari. Anyway, they were the right size and shape, and I bought them from Grand Prix Models in Banbury, who are very helpful suppliers of all sorts of things. So shortened everything, got it ready to paint, and in the next slide you'll see that it's all painted. Yes, all painted. I haven't put the seat belts in yet in the left hand side, but the wheels come up rather nicely. I like the wheels. And then in the right hand side you can see the finished model. The story goes that somebody was being taken around the factory at Newport Pagnell by Victor Gauntlet, who was running the company at the time, and the mule, which is how the factory would refer to this, the mule was sitting in a corner, and the chap said, "Oh, that's nice. What's that?" and was told, and he said, "Oh, could I buy it? And would you put it into roadworthy condition for me, please?" And they obviously reached agreement, and the car was turned out in this lovely blue with the parchment coloured leather. A delightful looking car. I really think it's a super looking coupe. The proportions just seem to work. Anyway, I've never seen the car, but there were pictures and an article published in, I can't remember what magazine it was now. And I think that the factory even considered making some to sell on a production basis, but never did. So this is a single car. You'll be jolly lucky if you'll see it, but I'm rather pleased to have the model in my collection. So this is a short where I've shortened the body. The next one is where I've lengthened it. I wanted to make a Virage Volante long wheelbase. Nobody made a kit for it. The kit on the left is, I think, by Saxon Models. Yes, it's Saxon Models one. That's the kit out of the box. A mixture of white metal and resin, photo etch, nice wheels, and decent transfers as well. It's a very good kit. I can't now remember why I used the coupe rather than the Volante version, but it doesn't really matter. But you can see on the right hand side, you can see where the the body and the under tray were sawn in half. And I used a little spacer to get the same spacing each side, and I put a strengthening plate, which you can see in the picture of the body at the top. And at the bottom, you can see the interior also has a strengthening plate. I think that looks like brass. The seats needed a bit of modification because the fluting was different. And I built up the hood, or the folding hood, which never the most attractive part of the Volante, but nevertheless, that's what they look pretty well what they look like. I built that up with the sort of body filler that you would use if you were mending a car. It's commercially available stuff. I go to Hawford's and get a packet of isopon or body filler, whatever it's called, and it works well. It sets, you mix the two chemicals up, and it's easy to file, so it's good to work with. So those are the components, and in the next slide we can see the paint. I think I had the paint mixed up specially. I can't remember now. I think that was one of the ones I went to Hawford's for. And you can see the seat belts. You can see why I was banging on about seat belts just now. Seat belts in an open car, very much a feature of the car. I just make them out of very thin aluminium sheet. I think it's an old toothpaste tube. And I've got some buckles, because the buckles came in the Saxon model kit, which was great. And the wheels are polished up quite nicely, and then it's just a matter of assembling it. So that's a modified kit where you extend the body and all the components. So you can build them standard, you can modify them with a lengthened wheelbase. Yeah, that's the main sort of modifications that I will do.
So apart from building models from kits, what else have you done?
Oh, yeah, one of the things you can do, which you can repaint a ready-built one. The top left is, I think that's XO, I can't remember. Anyway, that's one you could buy in a shop. DBR9, as it says there, race at Spa. I thought, because I'd come across some transfers, I thought I'd like to make it as a different car. And I bought the sheet of transfers, which you can see applied on the bottom left there, for a DBR9 at the same race. Of course, what you then have to do with your ready-built mod is you have to take it apart and vandalize it. I'm sure the people at Mini Champs or XO would be a bit upset. Anyway, you undo 2 screws, the body comes off, the under, or the chassis, if you like, which you can see with the 2 axles and the wheels and tires comes apart. The interior with the rollover cage comes out. That's quite straightforward. Then you have things like the lamps. They're not designed to be taken apart because these these high volume manufacturers want to make their models at high volume, easily and inexpensively. So that's how they're designed. And you can see the bottom on the left, the little red moldings are the two rear lamps, and they've got pegs on them. The pegs fit through little holes, and then you go over them with a hot iron, and that spreads out the plastic and holds them in place. Well, you have to file or cut off the plastic and then poke with a sharp instrument and get the lamps out. I was interested to see how they've made the windows in two halves. I'm quite surprised with that, but you can see that I've managed to break some of the flanges which would fit that around the little pegs. It didn't really matter because they would still fit back properly. And then above that, just to the right of what we'll call the chassis, that's the piece I think that fits under the windscreen wipers. And again, I've broken one of the, that just slightly down to the left. Yeah, that's it, that one there. You can see I've broken one of the holes, but again, it didn't actually matter too much. By the time I'd reassembled it, it was fine. What did surprise me was how much detail they put into the bit with the rollover cage. Amazingly detailed, and yet most of the time you can't see it because these cars weren't driven with the windows down. In fact, I don't think you can lower the windows, can you? But the seat is there, the instrument panel, the switch gear, fire extinguishers, all sorts of things are in there. It really is beautifully made. I didn't really do much to that, except just take all the paint off, apply silver paint, put on the transfers, put on the lacquer, and then reassemble it. I think I had to change, there was a slight change to the rear spoiler, in plan view it was slightly different shape, but nothing major. So it's really dismantle, take off the paint and put the transfers on, and there you are. I can't remember how long it was, but about 6 months maybe after I'd finished my model and was jolly pleased with it, one of the volume manufacturers started selling them as ready-built cars. Well, there you go, you don't win them all. But I made mine. The ones that you will see in this livery, this Gigawave livery, will be almost certainly an off-the-shelf one. Some of the other things that I've changed, well, I haven't needed to change it. This one is converting from left-hand drive to right-hand drive. Not terribly difficult to do. I mean, there's a lot of fiddling about. You have to saw bits off and glue them and then apply filler and that sort of thing. So that's repainting one. The final way of building a model is to build it from scratch. This is not quite built from scratch because, as you can see, I built this model from a kit. This is the car that I used to own. I had it for about 40 years, a 1933 long wheelbase Tourer, painted white. I expect a lot of you, well, some of you will have seen it. In the left-hand picture, you could perhaps see that I've sawn the roof off because I didn't take a picture when I first started building it, and this was probably 20 years ago. It was a two-door saloon. I think it was 1931 or 32. The factory only made one. A lovely car in its design. The kit was made by DG. You can just about see DG written on the base plate. I didn't use that. I didn't use the wings, the front wings. I did use the rear wings, and you could perhaps see that I've already lengthened the body, and I've started filling up some of the holes and made a bit of, yeah, it looks a bit messy because it hasn't been painted yet. The chassis at the bottom, I made that from sheet steel, excuse me, and I super glued it all together. Perhaps I should have soldered it or welded it, but I didn't. And the first set of wheels painted dark green with the tires on them. They're cast because that was all I could get at the time. The original wheels, you can see top right, are the what I could refer to as the dinner plate ones. If you look at the right-hand image, you can see 3 sets of wheels. The top set is the green ones, which with the cast wheels. And then when photo etching came out, oh, have some of those. So I got a set of photo etched wheels and painted them the tan color, but they were a bit small. because that was all you could get. And then I bought a kit from SMTS for a similar car to this, and that came with the proper size 19-inch, I think it is 19-inch wheels, with these beautiful photo etched spokes and the tires all of the right size. So that was lovely. So I've used, well, I haven't used, but I've had 3 sets of wheels, and I'll show you a picture of the finished model in a moment. At the bottom, in the middle, there's a whole series of chrome plated things like oil filler caps, which came from the SMTS kit, some of which I used. I used their front wings, I think, and I used several different versions of the exhaust pipe. And I think in the end I used the SMTS one because it was chrome plated, which was lovely. My chassis, which has now been painted, and you can see the toe board with the pedals, and the pedals in this case go through holes in the toe board, and the fascia panel, which I built and found instruments and so on from the parts box. The seats came from the SMTS kit. It's the original radiator grille, funnily enough, from the DG kit. The SMTS one was much better made, but it didn't fit on the front. So I sawed the headlamps off and fitted them on stalks. And then the front apron, just to the left of the grills, I made that out of a piece of thin metal and cut the louvers in. The windscreen frame, which you can see just below, that's from the SMTS kit. I re-sighted one of the mirrors and cut the other one off. Needed a little bit of modification to fit the curve of the body, but it fitted well and came out nicely. And in the next slide, you can see 2 pictures of the finished model at the bottom and 2 pictures of the finished car at the top. Jeff very kindly put these 4 images together because I hadn't realized that we'd got them. So I'd taken in fact, I took all 4 pictures, but he was smart enough to find the corresponding views. There are a few things that I would improve or could be improved, but I'm really pleased with it. The only thing with building a model from scratch is it took me absolutely ages to do it because I kept going back to it thinking, no, that won't do. Where can I find a part for this or that? But now it's finished. I have to say I'm really pleased with it. And the car now is with a new owner because I sold it in 2014. It went to Akira Batelli, who sold it late last year to a gentleman who lives quite close to Olney. The car is now painted dark blue. It's got red seats and red carpet. I like it as it was white, but then I had it for 40 years, so I wouldn't I? But it looks lovely in its new paint and trim. Mechanically, it needs a bit of work doing to it, but the gentleman who's bought it is a chartered engineer, and so he's going to do a great job on building that. Okay, so that's really all I think I plan to tell you. I hope that you've found it interesting. Anybody got any questions?
Just a reminder to everybody that you'll have to unmute yourself if you want to ask questions.
Can you unmute me?
You are unmuted, Ian.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Morning, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for that. That was very interesting. Can I ask you, not only as a satisfied customer of one of your cars, one of your models, but for the centenary of the Aston Martin company and all that sails with it, the whole family, as I call it. When I was sitting on the steering committee, bringing all the various aspects of Aston Martin together, you and I, and with a lot of help from people that you know well, created, I think it was 2 sets of models of very carefully selected famous Aston or limited edition Aston Martins. And I always wonder how how many were sold and how what I think were extremely good investments, probably for those that did buy them, have managed to get on. But they were very special, and I would have thought very sought after by younger model makers than I am, for example. Yeah, does it ring a bell?
Yes, it certainly does. Yes, I remember that. We got a lot of cooperation and help from SMTS, who made the models, and they made a number of models specially for that, like coal scuttle, which I don't think they would have made otherwise, right up to what was the most recent model they made. It was the what we call the centenary car, which turned out to be the 2012 Vantage, wasn't it? With the rear, that amazing rear spoiler built into the body. Yeah, they were a lovely set of cars. I've got a set behind me. I don't know whether you can see them. Whoops. Yes, you can see over my shoulder. They came in a cabinet like that, and after a little while, after they'd sold a number of kits, SMTS said, well, you don't have to have the 12 models that we've specified. You can have a different 12, and so I've got in my set my DB24 and my DB7. I thought I'd rather like that. But yeah, they were lovely sets. I can't actually remember how many were sold, but yeah, they're very good. I think the Trust's got a set. I can't be sure about that, but there are people about who bought them, and I think they were extremely pleased with them. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was just wondering, I think we've spoken, Richard, about 3D printing, and I don't think you've had any experience of it, but I just wonder if any of the people dialing in have got any thoughts about 3D printing of model cars.
I think the only thing that I can tell you about it is that I know that SMTS are using 3D printing. I think it's to build their master models from which they make the molds, which they use then to make the production components. I think that's what they're doing, using them for, rather than making them for pieces, using them to make pieces for the kits. But I have to say, I'm not sure. But it's an interesting technology, and I'm sure that as time goes by, more and more people will be using it. I don't think we've got anyone from SMTS with us, have we? I don't know. No. Okay. Any other questions at all?
Well, if not, then I'd just like to say a big thank you to Richard for that. It's a very interesting talk. Thank you very much. And yeah, and obviously thanks to Christine for facilitating it as well.
And my thanks to you, the audience, too, for being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so don't forget that this will be uploaded onto the club YouTube channel. I'll send that off hopefully on Monday. But thank you, Richard and Jeff, and I hope you found it interesting. And keep an eye on the website for any other virtual events that are coming up in the near future.
Thank you, Christine.
And just a little plug here, don't forget to book for the Spring Concours if you haven't done already. It's 50% full already, so and that's within a week, so make sure you get in there quite quickly.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.